A young woman and a 7-day contract that bought not only her purity, but her soul. On the first night, he cried while touching her, as if she were his only remedy. And she saw the most feared man in the country cry for love. If this story caught your attention, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. The smell of hospital disinfectant still clung to Emily's skin as she descended the steps of Memorial Hospital in Chicago, carrying on her shoulders the weight of a decision that would change her life forever. The white envelope in her hands trembled along with her cold fingers, and inside it was the answer to the desperation that had been eating away at her for weeks. $200,000. That was the amount she needed to save the life of Tyler, her 16-year-old brother, who had been born with a severe congenital heart condition and was now on the public healthcare waiting list for a surgery that might never come in time. At 21, Emily Parker never imagined that her beauty could be used as currency. The daughter of a cleaning lady who died of cancer when Emily was 17, raised in the outskirts of Westbrook Heights, she had known life's hardships since childhood. But she also knew the strength that came from unconditional love for Tyler, the boy with big eyes and a fragile smile, who was her only family in the world. When the doctors said he wouldn't last 3 more months without surgery, she knew she would do anything to save him. That's when Tiffany, an acquaintance who worked as an escort for wealthy men, told her about Nathaniel Blackwood, a shipping magnate who controlled half the exports from Port Chicago, owner of a fortune built over generations of businesses that straddled the line between legal and questionable. Tiffany explained that he sometimes offered specific contracts to young, beautiful women, contracts that involved exclusive companionship for set periods, always with clear rules and generous payments. The meeting was arranged at a discreet restaurant in Oakwood Hills. Emily arrived nervous, wearing the only decent dress she owned, a simple black one that had belonged to her mother. Nathaniel Blackwood was waiting at a reserved table in the back, and when she first saw him, her stomach turned. It wasn't just his physical, imposing presence that impressed her, but something deeper and more disturbing in his grey eyes. He was about 35, with black hair combed back, a well-groomed beard that accentuated his strong jawline, and wore a suit that probably cost more than her annual salary as a fast food worker. Throughout their conversation, he was direct and cold. He explained that he needed female companionship for 7 specific days, during which she would need to be available 24 hours a day to accompany him to social and private engagements. The rules were clear: absolute obedience, total discretion, and no contact with the outside world during that period. In exchange, she would receive $200,000, transferred on the first day of the contract. Emily felt her hands sweat as he slid the contract across the table. The words seemed to dance on the paper as she tried to process the magnitude of what she was about to do. She thought of Tyler, how he smiled even when the pain in his chest left him breathless, the way he held her hand and told her everything would be okay, even knowing she was lying when she repeated the same words back to him. When she signed the document, Nathaniel observed her with an intensity that made her feel completely naked, even though she was fully dressed. He explained that a car would pick her up on Friday at 8 in the evening in front of the hospital, and that she should bring only a small suitcase with personal items. Everything else would be provided by him. The 3 days that followed passed in a blur of anxiety and preparation. Emily obtained medical authorization for Tyler's surgery, lied to the few friends she had about the money, saying she had won the lottery, and spent hours looking at her reflection in the mirror, trying to convince herself she was strong enough to face what was coming. On Friday, when the black Mercedes stopped in front of the hospital, Emily felt her legs weaken. The driver, a mature man with a respectable appearance, got out and opened the back door without saying a word. She entered the car with the feeling of crossing a portal into another universe, a place where the rules she knew no longer applied. During the journey through the streets of Chicago, she observed the city transform around her. They left the central region, passed through the wealthy neighborhoods, and finally arrived at an imposing gate in Lakeshore Heights. The mansion that revealed itself behind the high walls was like something out of a movie, with perfectly maintained gardens, marble fountains, and architecture that impressively blended the classic with the modern. Nathaniel was waiting at the main entrance, wearing a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing muscular forearms marked with discreet but elaborate tattoos. He greeted her with a nod, took her suitcase and led her into the house without ceremony. The interior of the mansion was even more impressive than the exterior. Marble, crystal and fine wood combined in spacious and sophisticated environments, decorated with artwork that Emily had only seen in books. He took her directly to the room where she would stay, a spacious suite overlooking the gardens furnished with discreet but evident luxury. It was there, standing in the middle of that room that was larger than the apartment where she lived with Tyler, that Emily finally understood the real dimension of the social abyss that separated her world from Nathaniel Blackwood's, and it was there that she swore to herself that no matter what happened in the next 7 days, she would leave with her dignity intact and the money needed to save her brother's life. On the first night, Emily could barely sleep. The room was too quiet, too luxurious, and she felt like an intruder in a world that didn't belong to her. In the morning, an elegant middle-aged woman named Margaret appeared in her room, carrying several bags from expensive stores. She explained that she was the housekeeper and that Nathaniel had instructed that Emily be properly prepared for the engagements they would have. The clothes were beautiful, but Emily felt like a doll being dressed. Designer dresses, shoes that cost more than her monthly salary, delicate jewelry that shined against her olive skin. Margaret made her up with skilled hands, transforming her natural beauty into something more sophisticated, more suited to the environment in which she now found herself. The first engagement was a business lunch at a 5-star restaurant in the Gold Coast. Nathaniel appeared impeccable in a dark grey suit, and when their eyes met, Emily felt a shiver that she couldn't classify as fear or attraction. He greeted her formally, but his hand on her waist when he guided her to the car was possessive, almost proprietary. During lunch, Emily remained silent while Nathaniel discussed export contracts with 2 older men. She noticed how he commanded the table, how his presence dominated the environment even when he spoke softly. There was something magnetically dangerous about him, a contained energy that seemed ready to explode at any moment. When one of the men made a suggestive comment about her beauty, asking if she was available for other arrangements, Emily saw Nathaniel's eyes darken. His response was a cold smile and a phrase that cut through the air like a blade. "She is mine, completely mine, and I don't share what's mine." The way he said those words made Emily's blood freeze and boil at the same time. There was a possessive intensity in his voice that frightened her, but also awakened something primitive inside her that she didn't know existed. After lunch, he took her to see his offices downtown. The building was modern and imposing, and when they entered the private elevator that led to the top floor, Emily felt the space become charged with tension. Nathaniel watched her through the reflection in the polished metal, and she could feel the weight of his gaze on every inch of her skin. His office was a declaration of power. Floor-to-ceiling glass offered a panoramic view of Chicago, and the minimalist but expensive decoration spoke of someone who didn't need to show off to impress. He made her sit on a leather sofa while he took some calls, and Emily took the opportunity to observe him working. Nathaniel Blackwood was a man accustomed to being obeyed. His voice on the phone was firm, his orders clear and direct. She noticed how he moved his hands when speaking, how his muscles tensed under his shirt when something irritated him. There was an elegant brutality in his gestures, a contained violence that showed through even in his calmest moments. When he finished the calls, he approached her slowly, like a predator circling its prey. He sat beside her on the sofa, close enough for her to feel the heat of his body and the masculine cologne he wore. "You're nervous," he said, not as a question, but as a statement. "You're trembling." Emily tried to deny it, but he took her hand and held it between his. His hands were large, calloused despite his wealth, and she could feel small scars on his fingers. "You don't need to lie to me," Nathaniel continued, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I know exactly what you're feeling. Fear, confusion, and something else you don't want to admit." Emily raised her eyes to meet his, and what she saw there left her breathless. It wasn't just desire. It was a voracious hunger, a need that went beyond the physical. He wanted her, but not in the simple, direct way she had expected. There were layers of emotion in his eyes that she couldn't decipher. "I'm not like other men you've dealt with," he said, his voice low and hypnotic. "I won't be gentle. I won't pretend this is something romantic or beautiful. You signed a contract, and I intend to honor every clause of it." He leaned in closer, and Emily could feel his breath on her neck. "But I'm also not a monster. If you do exactly what I ask, when I ask, how I ask, these 7 days will pass without you getting hurt." His free hand rose to her face, and he traced the line of her jaw with fingers that were surprisingly gentle. "You're more beautiful than I expected," he murmured, "and much more innocent. That will make everything more interesting." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. There was a promise and a threat in his words, and she didn't know which of the two frightened her more. But when she thought of Tyler, of his brave smile and his desperate need for surgery, she found the strength to lift her chin and meet Nathaniel's gaze. "I won't break," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. "Do what you need to do. I can handle it." The smile that spread across Nathaniel's face was predatory, but there was something like admiration in his eyes. He moved away from her slowly, as if savoring the moment. "We'll see," he said, and his voice carried the promise that the next few days would be a test of limits she didn't even know she possessed. The second night was when Emily discovered that Nathaniel Blackwood didn't sleep like normal people. She had been instructed to wear a white silk nightgown that Margaret had left on her bed, and when she went down for dinner, she found him waiting in the formal dining room, a long mahogany table that could easily accommodate 20 people, but was set for only 2. He wore a black dress shirt with the first few buttons open, revealing the beginning of a tattoo that extended across his chest. His hair was slightly disheveled, as if he had run his hands through it repeatedly, and there was a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been present during the day. Dinner was served by silent staff who appeared and disappeared like ghosts. Emily ate little, her stomach closed with anxiety, while Nathaniel observed her with an intensity that made her feel like an animal in a zoo. He drank red wine throughout the meal, but seemed completely sober, just more relaxed, more dangerous. "Tell Samish about your brother," he said suddenly, breaking the tense silence that had settled between them. Emily looked up, surprised. "Why?" "Because I want to know. Because you're here because of him. Because I see how your eyes shine when you think of him, even in the midst of this whole situation." The way he said this, as if he were studying her every reaction, made Emily hesitate. But there was something genuine in his curiosity, so she decided to answer. "Tyler was born with a defective heart," she began, her voice soft. "My mother said it was as if God had forgotten to finish making him. But even so, he's the bravest person I know. He never complains about the pain, never feels bad about all the things he can't do." Nathaniel listened in silence, swirling the wine in his glass, his eyes never leaving her face. "When our mother died, he was 12. I promised her in her final days that I would take care of him, that I wouldn't let anything happen to him." Emily's voice faltered slightly. "It's the only promise that really matters in my life." "And you would do anything for him?" Nathaniel said, not as a question but as a statement. "Anything," she confirmed, meeting his eyes. "Including this." Something changed in Nathaniel's expression at that moment. The predator that had been present all day receded slightly, and for a second, Emily saw something almost human in his eyes. After dinner, he took her to his private study in the mansion, an even more intimate environment than his business office. The walls were lined with books. There was a lit fireplace and 2 leather armchairs positioned facing it. He poured 2 shots of whiskey and offered one to her. "I don't drink," Emily said. "Today you do," he replied, and his voice brooked no argument. The whiskey burned her throat and brought tears to her eyes, but she didn't complain. Nathaniel sat in the armchair across from hers, stretched out his legs, and observed her for long minutes in silence. "Do you know who I really he finally asked. "I know you're rich. I know you control businesses at the port. I know people are afraid of you. People are afraid of me because my grandfather and my father built this empire by stepping on whoever was necessary, because I inherited not only the fortune, but also the enemies, because in some circles the name Blackwood is synonymous with death. Emily felt a shiver run down her spine, but she didn't lower her eyes. My father died when I was 22, shot at the front door in front of my mother and sister. The killers were never found, but I knew who had given the order. His fingers tightened around the glass. It took me 5 years to get revenge. 5 years planning, waiting, building enough strength to completely destroy the man responsible. And did you succeed? The question left Emily's lips before she could contain herself. The smile Nathaniel gave her was cold as ice. He died screaming my name. His family lost everything. His sons now work for me without knowing who I really am. The silence that followed was dense, charged with an implicit violence that made Emily fully understand what kind of world she had entered. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because I want you to understand that there is nothing in my life that isn't calculated. Every person who enters my orbit is here for a specific reason. Every relationship I maintain serves a purpose." He stood up and walked to the window, his back to her. "You're also here for a reason, Emily, and it's not just because you need the money." "Then why?" Nathaniel turned slowly, and when his eyes met hers, Emily saw something that made her tremble. It wasn't just desire or possessiveness. It was an emotional hunger so intense, it seemed capable of consuming her completely. "Because you remind me of something I lost a long time ago," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "Innocence, purity, the ability to love someone more than yourself." Approached her slowly, and Emily found herself unable to move, hypnotized by his presence. "And because from the moment you walked into that restaurant, I knew you would be my ruin or my salvation." "There is no middle ground with me, Emily. I don't know how to love halfway." When he extended his hand to her, Emily hesitated only for a second before accepting it. Her fingers intertwined with his, and she felt an electric current run through her entire body. "Come," he said, his voice hoarse. "It's time for you to discover who you really are when all the masks fall away." Nathaniel led her through the corridors of the mansion until they reached a part of the house that Emily had not yet explored. It was an older wing, where marble gave way to dark wood, and the environments had a more somber and intimate air. He stopped in front of a double oak door and opened it, revealing his personal bedroom. The environment was masculine and opulent, dominated by a king-size bed with a black leather headboard. The walls were exposed brick-painted matte black, broken only by some contemporary artworks that seemed to represent themes of pain and redemption. A fireplace crackled in the corner, and the only sources of light were a few strategically positioned lamps that created dancing shadows. "Sit down," Nathaniel said, indicating an armchair near the fireplace. Emily obeyed, her eyes scanning the environment. There was something deeply personal about that room, as if each object had been chosen to reflect hidden parts of Nathaniel's soul. On the bedside table, she noticed several medicine bottles, all with names she didn't recognize. Nathaniel poured more whiskey for both of them and sat on the edge of the bed facing her. The firelight danced on his face, accentuating the marked angles of his features and making his tattoos seem even more mysterious. "You're afraid of me," he said, observing how she held the glass with both hands to disguise the tremor. "Should I be?" "Probably." He took a long sip of whiskey. "But not in the way you imagine." Nathaniel got up and walked to an antique dresser from which he took a framed photo. He returned and handed it to Emily. It was an image of a beautiful woman with dark hair and gentle eyes, embracing a boy of approximately 10 who was clearly a younger version of Nathaniel. "My mother," he explained, "Eleanor Blackwood, the kindest woman who ever existed on this earth." Emily studied the photo, noting the genuine happiness in the woman's eyes. "She's beautiful. Were you close?" "We were. She was everything to me. My father traveled constantly because of business, so it was she who raised me, who consoled me when I had nightmares, who taught me the difference between right and wrong." His voice became harsher, until my father destroyed everything. Nathaniel poured himself more whiskey, and Emily noticed that his hands were trembling almost imperceptibly. When I was 15, I discovered that my father had a mistress, a married woman with a small daughter. He spent fortunes on her, bought expensive gifts, even put her name on some properties. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. I told my mother, thinking I was doing the right thing. Emily felt her stomach tighten, sensing where the story was leading. My mother confronted my father. They fought for days. She threatened to leave him, take half the family fortune. But my father couldn't allow that. There would be scandal, investigations. Other people might discover the illicit businesses. Nathaniel stopped speaking, staring fixedly at the fire. "What happened?" Emily asked softly. "He killed her." The words came out as a harsh whisper, made it look like suicide. Too many pills, a forged letter talking about depression. But I knew the truth. I saw the marks on her arms where he held her, saw the fear in her eyes in the last days. Emily felt tears burn her eyes. "Nathaniel." After the funeral, my father continued with the mistress as if nothing had happened. And me? I began to plan my revenge, against him and against the woman who destroyed my family. Nathaniel rose abruptly and walked to the window. It took me years to discover who she was. Maria Parker, a cleaning lady, worked in different places to support her daughter after her husband abandoned them. Emily's blood froze when she heard the name. Parker, like her last name, like her mother's last name. The daughter's name was Emily, Nathaniel continued, still with his back to her. A pretty girl with big eyes and dreams too big for her social condition. Emily felt the world spin around her. The whiskey glass slipped from her hands and shattered on the wooden floor, but she didn't even notice. Her legs turned to jelly, and she had to grab the arms of the chair not to fall. "You knew," she whispered, her voice almost inaudible. "From the beginning you knew who I was." Nathaniel turned slowly, and what Emily saw in his eyes made her understand that she had fallen into a trap much more complex and cruel than she had ever imagined. I knew that Maria Parker had died of cancer 4 years ago. I knew her daughter took care of a sick brother. I knew you lived in Westbrook Heights, that she worked in a fast food restaurant, that she was desperate for money to pay for a surgery. Emily stood up, staggering, leaning against the wall. "You orchestrated all of this. The contract, the money, Tiffany seeking me out, everything was planned." "Every detail," Nathaniel confirmed, his voice cold as ice. "I wanted the daughter of the woman who destroyed my life. I wanted to have her in my hands, vulnerable, desperate. I wanted to do to her what my father did to my mother." Tears began to stream down Emily's face, but she forced herself to stand, to face him. "And now? Now that you have me here, what do you intend to do?" Nathaniel walked to her slowly, like a predator approaching his wounded prey. When he was close enough to touch her, he raised his hand and dried a tear from her face with his thumb. "Now," he said, his voice dangerously soft, "you'll discover that revenge is a dish best served cold, and I've waited 15 years to savor mine." Emily backed up until her back touched the cold wall. Her mind worked frantically, trying to process the magnitude of the betrayal. It wasn't just a commercial transaction. It wasn't just a contract for money. It was a meticulously planned revenge against her for something her mother had done decades ago. "My mother didn't know he was married," she said, her voice trembling with anger and despair. "She told me about him in her last days. Said he was the only man who made her feel special, who treated her like a queen for a few months. She didn't know, Nathaniel. She would never intentionally destroy a family." "That doesn't matter now," Nathaniel replied, but there was something different in his voice, a hesitation that wasn't there before. "The result was the same. My mother died because of that relationship." "Your mother died because your father was a monster," Emily shouted, finding courage in her desperation. "My mother didn't kill anyone. She was used just like you're using me now." Nathaniel took a step back, as if her words had physically hit him. For a moment, the cold and calculating man disappeared, and Emily saw something cross his eyes that seemed almost like doubt. "You don't understand," he murmured. "I've lived with this pain for 15 years. Every night I hear my mother's screams. Every morning I wake up remembering that she died thinking she wasn't loved, that she had been betrayed by the man she trusted. And now you want to do the same thing to me? Emily asked, wiping her face with the back of her hand. You want to destroy me to get revenge on a woman who's already dead? Nathaniel ran his hands through his hair, a display of vulnerability that Emily didn't expect to see. He walked to the fireplace and stood looking at the flames, his shoulders tense. When I started planning this, it seemed so simple, he said, his voice low. Find you, bring you here, make you pay for your mother's sins. But then what? Nathaniel turned to her, and Emily saw an inner struggle stamped in his eyes. Then I saw you, really saw you. The way you talk about your brother, how you would be capable of sacrificing yourself for him. The innocence in your eyes, even in the midst of this sordid situation. He walked to her again, but this time his movements were hesitant, almost careful. You're not like I imagined you would be. You're not greedy, you're not calculating. You're just a frightened girl who loves her brother more than her own life. And does that change anything? Emily asked, her heart beating erratically. Nathaniel raised his hand and touched her face softly, as if she were made of crystal. It changes. Everything, he whispered. Because I can no longer look at you and see the daughter of the woman I hate. I can only see you. The confession hung between them like a bridge over an abyss. Emily felt something move in her chest, a complex emotion that mixed fear, anger, and something dangerously close to understanding. Nathaniel, she began, but he shook his head. I know what you're going to say, that this is crazy, that I'm a monster, that you hate me. He moved away from her, going to the dresser where he took one of the medicine bottles. And you would be right. What is that? Emily asked, observing how he opened the bottle with trembling hands. Sedatives. To sleep. Nathaniel took 2 pills without water. I haven't slept for 15 years, Emily. Not really. Every night is the same thing. Nightmares, screams, my mother's face begging me to save her. Emily approached him cautiously. How many do you take per night? As many as necessary. He laughed bitterly. My doctor says I'm slowly killing myself, but I prefer that to insomnia. What if I stay? The question left Emily's lips before she could think better of it. If I stay here, of my own free will, not because of the contract or revenge, but because I choose to stay. Could you sleep? Nathaniel looked at her as if she had said something impossible. Why would you do that? Because I recognize pain when I see it, Emily answered honestly. Because I know what it's like to carry guilt for something we can't control. Because maybe we both deserve a chance to find peace. Nathaniel let the bottle fall to the floor, the pills scattering across the carpet. He approached her slowly, as if she were a dream that could disappear at any moment. You don't know what you're saying, he murmured. I'm a dangerous man, Emily. I've done terrible things. I've hurt people. If you stay with me, there will be no going back. And what if I don't care about that? She asked, surprising herself with her own courage. What if I choose to stay because I see who you really are beneath all this anger and thirst for revenge? Nathaniel's hands trembled when he placed them on her face. You can't save me, Emily. No one can. Maybe not, she whispered, but maybe you can let me try. When Nathaniel kissed her, it was with a desperation that broke Emily's heart. There were 15 years of pain in that kiss, an emotional hunger so intense that she felt as if she were being consumed by it. But there was also something more, a fragile hope, almost imperceptible, that perhaps it wasn't too late to find redemption. When they separated, both were crying. Nathaniel rested his forehead against hers, their breaths mixing in the small space between them. I don't know how to love without hurting, he confessed. Then tell me, Emily whispered back, and I'll teach you. That night, for the first time in 15 years, Nathaniel slept without medication. Emily remained awake by his side, observing how his face softened in sleep, how the tense muscles finally relaxed. He murmured incomprehensible words, and sometimes his body contracted as if fighting against invisible nightmares. But when she gently touched his arm, he calmed down. At dawn, when the first rays of sun entered through the heavy curtains, Nathaniel slowly opened his eyes. For a moment he seemed disoriented, as if he couldn't believe he had slept. Then his eyes found Emily's, and something changed in his expression. "You stayed awake all night," he said, his voice hoarse with sleep. "I needed to take care of you," she replied simply. Nathaniel sat up in bed, running his hands over his face. "I dreamed of my mother," he said, his voice laden with emotion. But this time she wasn't screaming, she was smiling. Emily sat beside him, taking care not to touch him, but staying close enough for him to know she was there. What was she like, really? A melancholy smile crossed Nathaniel's face. She sang while she cooked, always sang, had a beautiful voice, slightly husky, which she said she had inherited from my grandmother. She loved plants. The house was full of pots, flowers in every corner. "She loved you very much," Emily said softly. "She did, and I loved her too, more than anything in the world." His eyes filled with tears. "When she died, I swore I would never again allow someone to be important enough to destroy me that way." "But you did," Emily observed. "With me." Nathaniel looked at her with an intensity that made her shiver. "Yes, and that terrifies me more than any enemy I've ever faced." They were interrupted by discreet knocks on the door. Margaret entered carrying a breakfast tray, but stopped abruptly upon seeing Emily there, clearly having spent the night in Nathaniel's room. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, preparing to leave. "It's okay, Margaret," Nathaniel said. "Leave the tray there and prepare Emily's room so that she can move in here." Margaret nodded, professionally, but Emily saw the surprise in her eyes. When the housekeeper left, Nathaniel turned to her. "If you're going to stay, you'll stay for real, as my woman." "I didn't even say I would stay," Emily protested, but her voice carried no conviction. "You don't need to say it, it's written in your eyes." Nathaniel got up and walked to the window. "But before you make a definitive decision, there's something you need to know." Emily felt a chill in her stomach. "What?" "The doctor who's taking care of your brother, Dr. Michael Rivers. He's not just a talented cardiologist. He's my cousin." Emily's world seemed to tilt again. "What?" "I placed him there, asked him to take special care of Tyler, to keep me informed about his condition, to create a sense of urgency when necessary." Nathaniel couldn't look at her. "Your brother's surgery wasn't as urgent as he made it seem. Tyler is stable and can wait a few months without problems." Emily rose from the bed abruptly, feeling a mixture of relief and fury. "You manipulated everything, every detail of my life." "Yes," Nathaniel admitted, "but now I want to fix this. I want you to choose to stay because you want to, not because you need to. And Tyler, he'll have the best possible surgery, with the best doctors in the country, no matter what you decide about us." Nathaniel finally turned to her. "I've already transferred the money to your account. The contract is cancelled. You're free to leave now if you want." Emily remained silent for long minutes, processing everything, the manipulation, the lies, but also the vulnerability she had seen in him the night before. The way he had slept peacefully by her side, like a lost child, who had finally found his way home. "Why are you doing this?" she finally asked. "Because I fell in love with you," Nathaniel said simply, "and because my mother didn't raise a monster. She raised a man who lost his way, but who might still find his way back." Emily walked to him, stopping only when they were face to face. "If I stay, things will have to change. No manipulation, no games, no using people as chess pieces. I don't know if I can be different than what I am," Nathaniel admitted. "Then let's find out together," she said, placing her hand on his chest, feeling his heart beating rapidly. "But this time, let's do it the right way." Nathaniel covered her hand with his. "Are you sure? Because if you stay, I'll never let you go." "I don't know how to share, Emily. I don't know how to love halfway." "Neither do I," she replied, surprising both of them with her own intensity. "I love you, Nathaniel. I love the man you could be, and maybe I also love the man you are now, with all your flaws." When he kissed her this time, it was different. There was no desperation or pain, just a silent promise that they would find a way to build something beautiful on the ruins of their destroyed pasts. But outside the window, a black car was discreetly parking on the street. Inside it, a man observed the mansion through binoculars, speaking softly into a cell phone. The words he pronounced would make Nathaniel understand that his past had not yet finished collecting its debts. "He has a weakness now," the man said. "A girl. It's time to use that against him." 2 weeks after Emily decided to stay, life in the mansion had found a different rhythm. Nathaniel still woke up sometimes in the middle of the night, sweaty and screaming, but now there were gentle arms to calm him, a sweet voice whispering that everything was okay. Emily had visited Tyler 3 times, always accompanied by Nathaniel, and saw with her own eyes that her brother was really stable and being cared for by the best doctors. That Thursday morning, Emily was in the garden, trying to recreate the flower bed that Elena Blackwood had planted years ago. Nathaniel had found his mother's favorite plants in an expensive nursery in the city, and now Emily was carefully transplanting them, following instructions from old photos that Margaret had kept. "She would be happy to see you doing this," Nathaniel said, approaching from behind and wrapping his arms around her. "You think so?" Emily leaned back against his chest, feeling the comforting solidity of his body. "Sometimes I wonder if she would approve of me." "She would love you," Nathaniel said with conviction. "You have the same gentleness she had, the same silent strength." They were interrupted by Frank, Nathaniel's head of security, who approached with a worried expression. "Sir, we need to talk," he said, looking significantly at Emily. "You can speak in front of her," Nathaniel replied, but his posture stiffened. "We have information that Victor Reynolds is back in the country." Nathaniel's blood froze. Victor Reynolds was the eldest son of the man he had destroyed in revenge for his father's death. The son who had sworn one day to take revenge on the Blackwood family. "Are you sure?" Nathaniel asked, his voice already assuming the cold and calculating tone that Emily had learned to fear. "He arrived yesterday from London. Our contacts at the airport confirmed it, and, sir—" Frank hesitated. "He didn't come alone. He brought men. Many men?" Emily felt Nathaniel move away from her, physically and emotionally. In seconds, the man who had been in her arms transformed into the ruthless businessman who commanded an empire built on blood and fear. "Double the security at the house. Put men at Tyler's school. And I want to know where Victor is staying by the end of the day." "I've already arranged all that, sir, but there's something else." Frank looked at Emily with pity. "He knows about the young lady, has photos of her coming and going from the mansion. Someone is passing information to him." Reality hit Emily like a punch to the stomach. She wasn't just in love with Nathaniel. She was now at the center of a war that had begun even before she was born. "I need to get out of here," she said, taking a step back. "I need to leave before he uses this against you." "No," Nathaniel said firmly, holding her arm. "You're not going anywhere." "Nathaniel, be rational. If he uses me to get to you—" "He won't succeed," Nathaniel interrupted her, his eyes shining with a dangerous intensity. "Because I'll kill him first." "No," Emily shouted, surprising both men. "There will be no more deaths because of me. I won't be responsible for more violence." Nathaniel pulled her close, his hands gripping her shoulders tightly. "You don't understand. Victor won't stop until he completely destroys me. And now that he knows about you, he won't stop until he hurts you too." "Then let me go. Let me take Tyler far away, where he can't find us." "And live the rest of your life running? Looking over your shoulder every minute?" Nathaniel shook his head violently. "That's not a life, Emily. It's better than being dead." The silence that followed was tense and charged. Frank discreetly moved a few steps away, but remained alert. Nathaniel released Emily and ran his hands through his hair, a gesture she had learned to recognize as a sign that he was fighting with himself. "For years, I've been waiting for this moment," he finally said. "I knew that one day Victor would come after me. I thought I would be prepared." "And you're not?" Nathaniel looked at her with a vulnerability that broke her heart. "Not to fight for someone I love. Not to have something to lose besides my own life." Emily approached him again, placing her hands on his face. Then don't fight, let's leave together. The three of us, you, me, and Tyler. We can start over somewhere where no one knows us. You don't understand who I am, Nathaniel said, covering her hands with his. I can't just abandon everything. I have responsibilities, people who depend on me, businesses that can be sold, transferred. Nathaniel, none of this is worth more than your life, than our life. For a moment, Emily saw hope in his eyes, saw him consider the possibility of a normal life, away from the violence and revenge that had defined his existence for so long. But then his phone rang. Frank answered it, and his expression became grim. "Sir," he said, his voice tense, "they've got Tyler." Emily's world collapsed. Her legs gave way, and she would have fallen if Nathaniel hadn't held her. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." "How?" Nathaniel asked, his voice dangerously low. "They intercepted the ambulance that was taking him for routine tests, killed the 2 security guards who were with him." Frank paused. "Victor left a message. He wants to meet with you tonight at Warehouse 7 at the port. Alone." Nathaniel helped Emily sit on a garden bench, seeing how she trembled uncontrollably. Then he turned to Frank with an expression that the man had never seen before, a mixture of murderous fury and total despair. "Prepare everything," Nathaniel said, "but I'm not going alone. Victor wants a war, then that's what he'll get." "Nathaniel." "So?" Emily managed to say through her tears. "It's a trap. He wants you to go there to kill you." "Probably," Nathaniel agreed. "But he has your brother, and I'd rather die trying to save him than live knowing I didn't try." He knelt before Emily, taking her hands in his. "If I don't return tonight, Frank has instructions to take you to a safe place. You'll have enough money to live comfortably for the rest of your life, and Tyler will have all the medical care he needs." "I don't want your money," Emily sobbed. "I want you alive." Nathaniel kissed her hands softly. "And I want a life with you. But first, I need to end this once and for all." Night fell over Chicago like a black cloak, and Port Chicago never seemed so sinister. Nathaniel was in the back seat of an armored car, checking his weapons and bulletproof vest one last time. Beside him, Emily remained silent, looking out the window at the city lights that passed rapidly. "You shouldn't be here," Nathaniel said for the 10th time. "And you shouldn't be going alone into a trap," Emily replied, her voice firm despite the fear she felt. "Tyler is my brother. I'm not going to stay at home waiting for news. If something happens to me, Frank will get you out of there immediately. Do you promise you'll leave?" Emily turned to him, and Nathaniel saw a determination in her eyes that he didn't expect. "I promise I'll do everything so that all 3 of us get out of this situation alive." They arrived at the port at 10 at night. The place was strangely silent, with only the sound of waves beating against the pillars and the distant noise of cargo ships. Frank parked at a safe distance from Warehouse 7, and Nathaniel could see several dark figures strategically positioned around the building. "Sir, there are at least 15 men," Frank informed through the radio. "Our shooters are positioned, but they have the numerical advantage." "And Tyler?" Nathaniel asked. "We've confirmed he's inside the warehouse, alive from what we could observe." Nathaniel took a deep breath and checked his gun one last time. When he prepared to leave the car, Emily held his arm. "Wait," she said. "There's something I never told you about my mother." "Emily, now is not the time." "Yes, it is," she interrupted him. "She told me that the man she fell in love with had a son, a sad-eyed boy she sometimes saw when she visited his office. She said she always wanted to meet this boy, to care for him as if he were her own son." Nathaniel remained motionless, processing the words. "My mother loved you, Nathaniel. Even without really knowing you, she cared about you. She made my father promise that he would take care of you if something happened to her." "That's not possible," Nathaniel murmured. "She died feeling guilty, Nathaniel. Guilty for having fallen. In love with a married man, for having caused pain to a family, but mainly guilty for leaving behind a boy she knew would be alone in the world." Tears began to roll down Nathaniel's face. "Why did you never tell me this before?" "Because you needed to discover on your own that love is not revenge. That forgiving is not weakness." Emily kissed his face softly. "Now go get my brother and come back to me." Nathaniel left the car with a heavy heart, but also with a clarity he hadn't felt in years. He walked toward the warehouse, his hands raised in a sign of peace, but with all his senses alert. Victor Reynolds was waiting for him in the center of the empty warehouse, surrounded by his armed men. He was about 40, with graying hair and eyes that shone with a thirst for revenge that Nathaniel recognized very well. Tyler was tied to a chair beside him, conscious, but clearly hurt. "Nathaniel Blackwood," Victor said, his voice echoing in the empty space. "Finally, we meet face to face." "Victor," Nathaniel replied, stopping at a safe distance. "You want to settle scores with me, not with an innocent boy. Let him go." "Innocent?" Victor laughed bitterly. "Like my father was innocent when you destroyed him, like my family was innocent when we lost everything because of your revenge." "Your father killed mine," Nathaniel replied, keeping his voice calm, "and your family knew exactly how he made his money." "That doesn't justify what you did," Victor shouted, pointing his gun at Nathaniel. "You weren't content with killing my father. You destroyed our businesses, left us in misery, forced my mother to suicide." Nathaniel felt his stomach tighten. He knew his revenge had been complete, but he never knew the details about what happened to the family afterward. "I didn't know about your mother," he said honestly. "Of course you didn't know, because you didn't care about the consequences. Just like you don't care now." Victor gestured to one of his men who approached Tyler with a knife. "This boy will die because of your choices, just like my mother died because of my father's choices." "Stop!" Nathaniel shouted, taking a step forward. "You want to kill me? Then kill me, but leave the boy out of this." "No," Victor said, a cruel smile on his face. "First you're going to watch him die, then your little girlfriend, and only then will it be your turn." "His little girlfriend is already here," a female voice echoed through the warehouse. Nathaniel turned in panic and saw Emily walking toward them, her hands raised, completely unarmed. His heart stopped beating for a moment. "Emily, no!" he shouted. "It's okay," she replied, surprisingly calm. "I came to surrender myself." Victor seemed confused by the turn of events. "What game is this?" "It's no game," Emily said, stopping beside Nathaniel. "I came to propose an exchange, my life for my brother's." "You're crazy," Nathaniel whispered to her. "No," she whispered back. "I trust you." Victor observed the two for a moment, clearly trying to understand what was happening. "Very touching," he finally said. "But it doesn't change anything. All of you are going to die today." It was then that Emily did something no one expected. She approached Victor slowly, ignoring the guns pointed at her. "You lost your mother because of a war between men," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I lost mine because of poverty and lack of adequate medical care. Nathaniel lost his because of his own father's greed and jealousy." Victor hesitated, clearly not expecting that approach. "The three of us know what it's like to grow up without a mother," Emily continued. "We know the pain, the anger, the feeling that the world is unfair, but look where that anger has brought us. We're here, pointing guns at each other, perpetuating the cycle of violence that destroyed our families." "Shut up," Victor said, but his voice had lost some of its conviction. "My mother taught me that the only way to break a cycle of pain is to choose not to pass it on," Emily said, now close enough to touch his arm. "To choose to forgive, even when it's the hardest thing in the world." For a moment the warehouse was completely silent. Victor looked at Emily, then at Nathaniel, then at Tyler tied to the chair. Nathaniel saw something changing in his eyes, an inner struggle between the thirst for revenge and something more human. That's when everything fell apart. One of Victor's men, nervous with the tension of the moment and Emily's emotional speech, accidentally fired his gun. The shot echoed through the warehouse like thunder, and in seconds the place transformed into a battlefield. Nathaniel's shooters, positioned outside, responded immediately, and the shootout that followed was chaotic and brutal. Nathaniel threw himself over Emily, knocking her to the ground and protecting her with his own body as bullets whizzed over their heads. Victor shouted orders to his men, but half of them had already been hit by Nathaniel's snipers. "Tyler," Emily screamed, trying to get up to reach her brother. "Stay down," Nathaniel ordered, holding her firmly while firing at Victor's men. Branty. The midst of the chaos, Victor managed to reach Tyler and pressed his gun against the young man's head. "Stop shooting or I kill the boy," he shouted. The shooting ceased immediately. Nathaniel rose slowly, his gun still in hand, but pointed. "Downward. Let him go, Victor. Your fight is with me." "My fight is with everything you love," Victor replied, his voice laden with desperation and anger. "You took everything from me. Now I'm going to take everything from you." "You're right," Nathaniel said, surprising everyone. "I destroyed your family. I did it coldly, calculatedly, without thinking about the consequences for innocent people like your mother." Victor blinked, clearly not expecting that confession. "I became the same kind of monster that my father was," Nathaniel continued. "I thought I was doing justice, but I was just perpetuating the violence." "Nathaniel, what are you doing?" Emily whispered. "What I should have done a long time ago," he replied, completely lowering his gun and throwing it on the ground. "Victor, you want to kill me? Then kill me. But first, let me tell you something." Nathaniel walked slowly toward Victor, ignoring the guns of the men who were still standing. "I killed your father because he murdered mine, but that didn't bring peace to my soul. It didn't bring my mother back. It only brought more pain, more guilt, more sleepless nights." His eyes filled with tears. "If you kill me now, you'll have your revenge, but you'll also have my nights of insomnia, my nightmares, my emptiness." "You think this will make me feel sorry for you?" Victor asked, but his voice was trembling. "No," Nathaniel said, stopping a few meters away. "But maybe it will make you understand that killing is not the answer. It never was." Emily observed the scene with a broken heart. Seeing the man, she loved expose himself completely, offering his life to save her brother. She knew that Nathaniel was being sincere. He had found redemption through her love, and now he was willing to die for it. "I ask your forgiveness," Nathaniel said, his voice breaking. "Forgiveness for destroying your family. Forgiveness for having caused your mother's death. Forgiveness for having made you the angry man you are today." Victor hesitated, and for a moment Emily saw the orphaned boy behind the vengeful man, saw the pain he carried, the same pain that Nathaniel had carried for 15 years. "It's not enough," Victor whispered, but his gun trembled in his hands. "I know," Nathaniel agreed. "That's why I'm going to offer something more. Everything that's left of your father's businesses, all the assets I confiscated from your family, I'll return them. You can rebuild everything you lost." "And you think money solves everything?" "No," Nathaniel said, "but maybe it gives you a chance to start over, to be better than I was." Victor looked at Nathaniel, then at Emily, then at Tyler. His hands were trembling violently and tears began to stream down his face. "My mother," he said, his voice broken. "She killed herself because she couldn't live with the shame, because we lost everything, and she couldn't bear to see her children in need." "I'm sorry," Nathaniel said, and it was visible that he was speaking from the bottom of his heart. "She made me promise that I would take care of my younger siblings, that I wouldn't let anything happen to them." Victor slightly lowered the gun. "But I abandoned them to come after you. They're in London without money, without anyone to take care of them." Emily rose slowly, ignoring Nathaniel's silent protests. "Then go back to them," she said softly. "Be the brother your mother wanted you to be. Be the man she would be proud to call her son." Victor looked at her with eyes full of tears. "How can you talk about forgiveness after everything?" "Because I understand your pain," Emily replied, "and because I know my mother wouldn't want me to carry hatred in my heart. She taught me that love is always stronger than revenge." For long minutes, no one moved. The warehouse was silent, except for the moans of some wounded men. Finally, Victor completely lowered the gun and released Tyler. "This isn't over," he said, but his voice had lost all its aggressiveness. "I can't just forget." "No one is asking you to forget," Nathaniel said, "but maybe you can choose to build something new instead of destroying what's left." Victor nodded to his men who were still standing, and they began to move toward the exit. Before leaving, he turned one last time. If I find out you're lying about returning my family's assets, you won't, Nathaniel assured, because I'm not lying. Victor nodded once and disappeared into the darkness of the night, taking his men with him. Emily ran to Tyler and hugged him desperately, checking if he was hurt. The young man was pale and frightened, but alive and relatively unharmed. "It's okay," she whispered, caressing his hair. "It's okay now." Nathaniel approached them slowly, still processing what had happened. Emily extended a hand to him, and when he touched it, she pulled him into the hug. "It's over," she whispered against his chest. "Finally over." But Nathaniel knew that in reality, it was just beginning. For the first time in his adult life, he had the chance to build something based on love instead of revenge, and with Emily and Tyler by his side, he was ready to discover who he could become. 1 year later, the mansion in Lakeshore Heights had completely transformed. The gardens bloomed with the same flowers that Elena Blackwood had planted decades ago, carefully restored by Emily. The sound of laughter echoed through corridors that previously knew only silence and tension, and for the first time in 15 years, that house truly seemed like a home. Tyler had undergone surgery 3 months after the events at the port, and the recovery was perfect. Now at 17, he studied at one of the best private schools in Chicago and dreamed of being a cardiologist to help other children like him. His relationship with Nathaniel had started tense. It was difficult to accept the man who had orchestrated so much suffering in their lives, but with time he saw how Nathaniel genuinely loved his sister and how he had changed. Nathaniel fulfilled his promise to Victor. All the assets confiscated from the Reynolds family were returned, along with an additional amount as compensation for the years of suffering. Victor returned to London, where he used the money to open a legitimate business and take care of his younger siblings. They exchanged occasional emails, not exactly a friendship, but a mutual recognition that both had chosen a different path. Nathaniel's businesses also changed drastically. He sold most of his port operations and invested in technology and sustainability companies. He was still rich, but now his wealth came from sources that didn't make him lose sleep at night. He created a foundation in his mother's name that offered scholarships to underprivileged youth and free medical care for children with heart problems. That Saturday morning, Emily was in the kitchen preparing breakfast when she felt familiar, arms wrap around her waist. Nathaniel had woken up without nightmares for the 5th consecutive night, a personal record. "Good morning, my love," he murmured against her neck, softly kissing the skin there. "Good morning," she replied, turning in his arms to kiss him properly. "Did you sleep well?" "Like a baby. You have magical powers." "Or maybe you finally found peace," Emily suggested, caressing his face. Nathaniel had changed physically too. He was still imposing and attractive, but his features were softer, his eyes brighter. He smiled genuinely now, not just the cold and calculated smiles of the past. "Has Tyler come down yet?" he asked. "Still sleeping? It's Saturday, remember? Teenagers hibernate on weekends." Nathaniel laughed, a sound that Emily never tired of hearing. "Speaking of hibernation, how about we go back to bed for another hour?" "Tempting," Emily said, kissing him again. "But we have an important visitor today." "Ah, that's right. Dr. Rivers is coming to check how Tyler is adapting to the new medication." Michael Rivers, Nathaniel's cousin who had cared for Tyler, had become a dear friend of the family. The initial guilt that Nathaniel felt for having used Michael in his plans had transformed into genuine gratitude when he saw how the doctor really cared about Tyler's well-being. They were interrupted by Tyler coming down the stairs, still in pajamas and with messy hair. "Good morning, family," he said, stretching. In the last few months he had grown a few inches and gained healthy weight. The surgery had been a complete success. "Good morning, champ," Nathaniel replied, and Emily smiled to see how their relationship had evolved. Tyler now called Nathaniel by his name, not with the initial coldness, but with genuine affection. "Has Dr. Michael arrived yet?" Tyler asked, serving himself orange juice. "Not yet, but when he does, I want you to tell him about those dizzy spells you had last week." I already told you it was just because I ran too much in PE. It wasn't anything. Related to my heart. Even so, it's better to check, Nathaniel said, supporting Emily. Health is not something to joke about. Tyler rolled his eyes but agreed. The doorbell rang and Margaret announced Dr. Rivers' arrival. After the examination, which confirmed that Tyler was perfectly healthy, the four sat in the garden to talk. Michael had become Nathaniel's confidant in the process of changing his businesses, offering advice on how to redirect his life. "How's the new clinic project going?" Michael asked. "Better than we expected," Nathaniel replied, his eyes shining with pride. "We got funding for 3 units in peripheral neighborhoods. The first should open next month. And you, Emily, how are you adapting to the education program?" Emily had returned to studies, pursuing education at a private university. Her dream was to work with underprivileged children, perhaps open a community school in the future. "It's challenging," she admitted, "but rewarding. I want to work at the foundation when I graduate, help other families like ours." "Our family wasn't underprivileged," Tyler protested, joking. "We were just financially challenged." Everyone laughed, and Emily felt a wave of gratitude as she looked around. This life, this imperfect but loving family, was more than she had ever dared to dream. Later that night, after Michael had left and Tyler was in his room studying, Nathaniel and Emily walked through the gardens under the moonlight. They did this every night now, a silent ritual that connected them at the end of each day. "There's something I want to show you," Nathaniel said, stopping near the fountain that had been restored. He knelt on the ground, and Emily felt her heart race when she saw the small velvet box in his hands. "Emily Parker," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "you saved me from myself. You taught me that love is stronger than revenge, that forgiveness is more powerful than hatred. You gave me a family, a reason to live, a chance to be the man my mother wanted me to be." Tears began to stream down Emily's face. "Will you marry me?" Nathaniel asked, opening the box to reveal a simple but beautiful ring. "Not because you need to, not because of a contract, but because you choose to build a life with me." "Yes," Emily whispered, then repeated, louder, "Yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes!" When Nathaniel slid the ring onto her finger, Emily thought of her mother, of how happy she would be to know that her daughter had found not just love, but the kind of love that transforms and redeems. They married 3 months later in a small but perfect ceremony in the mansion's garden. Tyler was Nathaniel's best man, Michael was Emily's, and Margaret cried more than anyone during the vows. 2 years later, when Emily gave birth to a little girl with big eyes and dark hair, they named her Elena in honor of Nathaniel's mother. And when little Eleanor took her first steps in the same garden where her parents fell in love, Emily knew they had definitively broken the cycle of pain and revenge, replacing it with something much more powerful, a family built on love, forgiveness, and second chances. Nathaniel Blackwood, who was once a man consumed by the thirst for revenge, was now simply a dedicated husband, a loving father, and a chosen brother for Tyler. And Emily, who had begun her journey as a desperate woman